everybody, this is Jelmer from Bands. I'm here with another Quarantip, and this one is about how to use an amplifier. So the first thing that you do when you've got your amplifier, here you've got some examples of how it might look like. The first thing you do is all those buttons, you put them in neutral. You put them at 12 o'clock. You can see that here also. Here you can see it really well. And then what you do is you put the button that's called gain or volume and the button that's called master, you put them down. Then you can plug in your instruments, you can turn on the amplifier, and then you start with, you play your piece of music. You can put the master up a little bit, depending on how strong it is. And the gain, you can slowly start adjusting the gain. So the gain is your first volume, that's the input volume. And you don't want to overdo that, because if you put it too loud, you can see here you get clipping in the retching, you get this nasty distortion on it. Sometimes you might want a bit of distortion on it, but first of all, don't do that. So get a nice volume, and then you can turn your master up a bit to hear yourself better. Now again, these buttons might be called different. Here it's gain, gain. Here it says volume, volume, gain, gain, both. Volume, master. So these buttons sometimes have different names, but it's fairly easy to find out what they are called and what they do. So then I've got the equalization. I've put everything in neutral. It's very important. Don't put everything off, don't put everything on its maximum, put everything in neutral, because your amplifier is already made to sound good. If you got a guitar amplifier, it's made to make a guitar sound good. If you've got a bass amplifier, it's made to make a bass sound good. So if you put everything in neutral, you should get a pretty nice sound. Then you can start adjusting the sounds on your taste, or depending on the room. Maybe you need some more high frequencies, maybe you need some more low frequencies. Now, what does this equalization actually do? Here you can see we've got the spectrum of frequencies. And when I'm playing music, like this guitar line, then there's not just one frequency in use. You can see that there's a whole spectrum of frequencies in use. What the equalization does is it boosts certain parts of this spectrum. So if I put up the bass, sometimes it's also called low, I will get more low sounds. If I take that away, I'll get less of them. If I have the low mid, sometimes the mids, they're just called mid. There's no distinction between the low mid and the high mid. I think you see it on these examples here. Yeah, here it only has middle, middle, middle. But sometimes you get the difference between the low mid and the high mid. So low mid. Really hear that. If you get that away, you get this really thin sound. High mid. Treble. Treble is the high part, sometimes it's just called high. And presence, that's not always on every amplifier. And what this does, it's really, it gets you a lot of the articulation, a lot of the notes of the fingers, and you get to really clearly hear it. What's being played. And can put an example with the bass. Go to the different channel here. I've got my bass. And again, I'll do the same thing. I start with adjusting my gain. Put the master up a bit. So I got a nice level. I don't want to overdo this gain. You hear, you get this nasty distortion, so you don't want to overdo that, so really important. Better put it down a bit and put your master up a lot. And with the bass, here you can hear like you get a lot of effect on those low frequencies. Low mid. And the high mid. That's something that slap bass players really like. You get those notes good. Treble. And the presence. So again, you get those fingers, the finger sound a lot. So I'll go back to the guitar here. So what do I do with this EQing? So you can adjust this a bit to my own taste. Important, don't overdo it. You know, if I want to get this nice full guitar sound, I can do something like this and get the highs out, but it just doesn't sound good. Remember, the amplifier is already made to sound good on its own. So you might just want to like boost some little things. And then we'll do it. Then, one problem that a lot of people have is that they cannot hear themselves in a band. And one solution that they think of is just turning themselves up, right? You cannot hear yourself, put it a bit louder. That is kind of counterproductive because first of all, your bandmates are not gonna like it. They are gonna put themselves up as well, and you just get this gigantic chaos. So that's not that useful. I mean, sometimes you might have to put yourself up, but there's other ways to make yourself hear yourself better. First of all, the positioning. Where are you standing? I see a lot of people standing next to their amplifiers, standing right in front of their amplifiers. Sound waves need some distance to go before you can really hear them, especially lower frequencies range. So bass players, if you cannot hear yourself, don't stand right in front of the amplifier. Stand 1 meter in front of it. Guitar players, I don't know why, but I see you often standing next to your amplifier and then saying you can't hear yourself. Well, stand in front of it. Positioning the amplifier, you can also turn the amp, turn it to face your ears, turn it up a bit, put it on a chair, put it on a couple of empty beer cases, whatever works. So that's one thing. Adjusting your placement and adjusting the placement of the amplifier so that you can hear yourself better. The other thing is that you can use those EQs. So for example, what I said, this presence, if I cannot hear myself, that's a really good way to stick out a bit more. So I might want to do that on the bass. Goes as well. Or I might want to put some treble on the bass. Just so I can hear myself a bit better. Now, do you notice how it starts to be easier to hear the instrument? So I hope that was some useful information, and if you have any questions you can send them in the WhatsApp group, or you can send me an email to jelmer.bands@gmail.com, and I'll see you next time for another Quarantip. Take care.